Well, for more on China-US trade's relationship, I'm joined by Sourabh Gupta. He's Senior Asia-Pacific International Relations Policy Specialist at ICAS. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So what do you think is driving the government to initiate so many probes, especially since they don't seem to be stemming from an uproar in these industries?
Donald Trump had come into office saying that he was going to really put the pressure on China, that he was going to initiate a lot of investigations, government-initiated investigations, and that he would find some way to reduce the trade deficit. He is sticking to that line and therefore proceeding on this in this regard. Even the 301 investigation on IPR was also a self-initiated one, and also after a very, very long period of time.
So then, since it's not coming from the actual industries themselves, what are the actual voices from the industries and the people working for them saying about what the government's doing?
Industry is always split. You know, the domestic production side always invites these sort of investigations so that it can have protection, particularly in these sunset industries like steel and aluminum, while most of the consuming side, which uses aluminum as a product in its, is typically unhappy about it. But the way trade remedy measures are framed typically, not just in the aluminum case, but in all cases, always support the domestic producing industry. And so they rule literally, and therefore this investigation will go forward.
Now let's step back and give this some context. We know that the products involved in this investigation is economically negligible. In fact, in 2016, imports were at 604 million. So compared to everything else, why do you think we're seeing this? Is this more about a gesture as opposed to substance?
I frankly feel this is more gesture than substance. He is trying to release some hot air, which is built up in the system, which is pent up in the system, and therefore gone ahead with these investigations. But that having been said, at the Chinese side, they are ready to be investigated as long as these are done on WTO compliant basis. This anti-dumping investigation will use what is called a non-market methodology to compute prices in China that it's being sold at not at fair value, and therefore it's itself procedurally proceeding on an illegal path which will not be WTO compliant, and this is not for China to accept.
So then, since the US is taking this path instead of going through the WTO, are there any concerns that this might perhaps set a precedent in terms of how people look at trade remedies with China?
There's already a great degree of anxiety of how many trade remedy cases have been put forth, and even that the appellate body of the WTO, which ultimately rules on this, is being kind of shortchanged because its membership is expiring. Its members move on, and new membership is not being put on those panels, and therefore they might not have enough capacity to deal with many of these issues. So there's a real fear that the trade remedy investigations are putting too much pressure on the system, and that these are being done knowingly in ways which the Trump administration knows will not pass muster at the WTO. And that's what's getting a lot of people upset.
So then, if you're a Chinese company and you're seeing this unfold, what are you thinking in terms of how you better protect yourself as you try and navigate these trade disputes?
It's just going to be hard to find any better means to protect, because the Trump folks are going to do what they are going to do. What one needs to do is, as soon as an investigation is initiated, you need to be upfront, provide your material or your data, and insist that it go as WTO compliant a fashion as possible. What China benefits from the rule of law being enforced on WTO anti-dumping and countervailing duty-related issues, and the whole purpose is to ensure that this goes via the right path and that this does not become a unilateral action based on an investigation which is not substantively complete.
So you have these two economic powerhouses, China and the US, clearly have two very interconnected economies. How do you think this escalation of trade disputes is going to affect their overall trade relationship going forward?
Oh, I actually think the next year will be a very, very hot one in terms of trade and economic issues. The reason is this: a lot of investigations have been initiated, but they have not come to completion point, but they will come to completion point early next year or in the mid part of the year. Particularly on the 301 case, there are a lot of folks hoping that there is something substantive found on the basis of which China is then hauled to court or unilaterally punished. And this situation just, I think, gets worse for the next couple of months. So it's important at this point of time. There's not a problem with having an investigation. The important thing is that that investigation follows international rules. And the fear is that so much pressure is being put in these trade remedy cases that they will circumvent the rules, and that will leave everybody worse off in the end.
Certainly a lot to keep an eye on there. Thank you as always, Sourabh Gupta, Senior Asia Pacific International Relations Policy Specialist for ICAS.